The old wooden house in the suburb of Harrisburg seemed even quieter on that gray morning, as if the structure itself were holding its breath. Emily Hartman parked the car in front of the garage, which hadn't been opened in years, and stood there for a few seconds, her hands trembling on the steering wheel. She didn't want to be there. She didn't want to see her brother. She didn't want to hear what he would surely say. But the family lawyer had made it clear. The reading of their father's will required the presence of both of them. Emily was 28 years old, worked as an administrative assistant at a community library, and led a simple life marked by small silences, quiet courage, and a constant feeling of not being enough. No matter how hard she tried, her brother always found a way to remind her that, deep down, she was insignificant, weak, or a burden to the family. Words that shouldn't affect an adult, but burned as if she were still 12 years old, hearing shouts behind her bedroom door. As she got out of the car, she took a deep breath and adjusted the light brown coat she had mended herself the previous week. The cold November wind cut her face and carried the scent of wet leaves scattered across the yard. The house seemed smaller than she remembered, and somewhere on the roof, a loud creaking sound announced that someone urgently needed to make repairs. Her father would have taken care of it if he were alive. He always took care of everything except his own feelings. Emily climbed the 3 steps to the porch and pushed open the already unlocked door. Inside, her brother Jackson sat on the sofa as if he owned everything: the house, the family history, their father's memory, the right to decide who was worth something and who wasn't. Jackson was 34 years old, tall, strong, full of confidence, and had made a career as a used car salesman. One of those salesmen who knew how to talk to anyone, convince any customer, manipulate any situation. He smiled, but it wasn't a welcoming smile. It was the smile of victory of someone who already expected to win before even starting. "Look who decided to show up," he said, crossing his arms. Little Emily, the useless one of the family. She didn't answer. She was too tired to argue, too tired to defend herself. Her father's death was still a fresh pain, and any exchange of words with Jackson would only make things worse. The lawyer, Mr. Rowan, was at the dining room table organizing papers and documents with almost ceremonial precision. He was a thin man with round glasses, always very calm, as if nothing in the world could surprise him. "Emily," he said, rising slightly to greet her, "I'm so sorry for your loss. I'm glad you came. We can begin in a few minutes." She nodded and sat down in one of the chairs furthest from the trying to ignore her brother's mocking gaze. "She arrived late, as always," Jackson commented. "I bet even her father wouldn't be surprised. You never took anything seriously." Emily took a deep breath, clutching her hands in her lap. The words were old, repeated so many times she recognized them as part of a script she hadn't chosen. Her father, with all his flaws, was at least restrained. He never said she was useless, but he also never defended her. The lawyer cleared his throat, asking for attention. Jackson settled himself on the sofa, anxious. "Very well," Mr. Rowan began. "Your father left a formal will, registered according to all the rules. However, there is something I need to explain first." Jackson smiled confidently. "Great. Let's see what's left of the house. The savings, the car. Everything he had should be mine. After all, I was the one who stayed here taking care of everything while she," he made a vague gesture with his hand, "was doing God knows what with her life." Emily swallowed hard, but kept her gaze fixed on the lawyer. She wasn't there to fight. She just wanted it to end. "Mr. Jackson," the lawyer continued, maintaining his neutral tone, "if you would allow me to finish reading before making any assumptions." The lawyer opened the leather briefcase and took out a beige-aged envelope with firm handwriting on the front. "Official will." He began to read. According to the formal document, Jackson inherited the house and all the physical assets contained within it, as well as part of his father's savings. Emily would receive a small sum of money, not enough to change her life. It was the kind of distribution Jackson had always hoped for. He, the strong, the capable son, inheriting the majority. She, the weak daughter, receiving the minimum. Jackson relaxed on the sofa, content, almost radiant. "It seems our old man knew what he was doing," he said. "Finally, a sensible decision." Emily remained quiet, but there was something in the lawyer's gaze that didn't quite fit with the end of the reading. A subtle tension, almost imperceptible, but present nonetheless. "However," said Mr. Round, "there is a second document. A document that your father requested be read only after the official will. He wrote it in his own hand and gave it to me personally a few months before he passed away." Jackson's smile disappeared. "What do you mean?" he asked, leaning forward. "Another will? That's not legal. There's only one will." "It's not exactly a will," the lawyer explained. "It's what we call a binding supplementary declaration. A perfectly legal instrument when filed by an authorized attorney. Your father fulfilled all the requirements." Jackson stood motionless, staring at the dark blue envelope the lawyer pulled from the briefcase. Emily, on the other hand, felt a slight flutter in her chest, something like surprise mixed with. The lawyer held the envelope between his fingers and then looked directly at Emily, as if the contents were somehow directed at her. "This second document," he said, "changes everything." Jackson blushed. "That's absurd. It must be some sentimental nonsense." He was always too emotional about her, even though she never did anything useful. Emily looked away, feeling her face grow hot, but the lawyer raised his hand, gesturing for silence. "Your father knew there would be resistance, so he left clear instructions about what I should do, and I will follow them now." The lawyer carefully opened the envelope. He took out several folded papers, handwritten in a script that Emily immediately recognized. Firm, bold, slightly slanted to the right. It was her father's way of writing when he wanted to be especially clear. The lawyer took a deep breath and began to read. "My children, if you are listening to this, it means I am no longer with you. Jackson, I know you always thought I preferred you. Maybe it seemed that way. Emily, I know you always felt less. I want to start by saying that you were both wrong." Emily felt a lump in her throat. "Jackson, you grew up believing the world owed you something. You always complained, always demanded, always yelled. But you never realized that the one who gave you the most was Emily. She always protected you, even when you didn't deserve it." Jackson opened his mouth to protest, but the lawyer silenced him with a firm look. "Emily, you always believed you were too small to be noticed. But the truth is, you were the greatest strength in this house. You were the one who kept everything standing when I didn't have the courage to admit I was unwell. You were the one who took care of me when I was sick, even when I asked you not to tell anyone." Emily put a hand to her mouth. Her brother glared at her angrily as if it were all her fault. The lawyer continued, "That's why I left an additional document that replaces part of the official will. Emily, you didn't know, but your mother left you a separate inheritance, an investment I made in your name when you were a child. I kept it a secret because I thought you didn't need the money to prove your worth." Jackson's eyes widened. "That's a lie," he whispered, "but it wasn't. Now I see that I was wrong. You never needed to prove anything, but I needed to correct my mistake. So I leave instructions for the entire amount invested, approximately $320,000, to be returned to you in full, Emily Hartman." The silence in the room was absolute. Jackson remained completely still. The lawyer continued, "Furthermore, I'm leaving a personal letter just for Emily, explaining details that don't fit in this document." Emily felt her hands trembling. $320,000? That would change her whole life. "Jackson, you will have the house, as per the official will. Emily, you will have your freedom. I have failed greatly as a father, but I pray that this final gesture will help you both find some kind of peace." The lawyer folded the document slowly. Emily didn't know whether to breathe, cry, or just remain there, trapped in the moment. Jackson stood up abruptly. "That's absurd!" he shouted. Her? The useless one?" Emily lowered her head, but there was no hatred in it. There was only a heaviness, a mixture of bad memories and longing for her father. The lawyer took a deep breath. "Your father knew this would be your reaction," he said calmly, and he left another note. Just 2 lines. He opened a small piece of paper and read, "If Jackson raises his voice, remind him that Emily is the only person in this house who has never let me down." Jackson's face turned red, almost purple. He opened his mouth to reply, but nothing came out. Emily, for the first time in her life, felt something new, stability. Emily stared intently at the worn carpet in the living room as she tried to grasp the weight of the revelation. The distant sound of a truck passing by on the street seemed to belong to another world, a world that still made sense. Here, however, nothing seemed real. The lawyer's voice, her brother's heavy breathing, the smell of old wood, everything blended together in a haze that held her captive between disbelief and shock. She never imagined her father had saved so much money. Never. All her life she had grown up believing they were a simple family, always making ends meet, saving wherever they could, and foregoing luxury. There had never been any signs of hidden wealth. Nothing to suggest such a large investment in his name. And more than that, she had never imagined her father would have left such a direct, clear confession, so different from the heavy silence he carried in life. Jackson, on the other hand, paced back and forth like a caged animal. He had always been impulsive, but now he seemed dangerously unstable. His jaw was clenched, his fists tightened, his eyes half closed with rage. "Ridiculous," he murmured, his voice faltering. "He would never do that. Not like this. Not for her." Emily said nothing. She had always learned that, with Jackson, responding only fueled the flame. The lawyer, however, remained unperturbed, as if he dealt with situations like this every day. "Your father came to my office months before he passed away," Mr. Rowan said calmly. "He documented the investment, the source of the money, and signed the legal transfer. I have all the authenticated documents, recordings of the meetings, and office witnesses." He knew exactly what he was doing. Jackson took a deep breath, but he didn't seem satisfied. But ... that goes against the will, he shouted, trying to find some argument to his advantage. "The official will came first. That should take precedence." The lawyer crossed his hands on the table and explained, with the patience of someone who knew that dynamic well, "That's precisely why this document exists. Your father requested that the traditional will be read first, knowing you would expect something that would benefit you. Only then did he authorize the disclosure of the supplementary declaration. It's a completely valid legal recourse. He wanted things done this way." Jackson fell silent, a heavy, dense, almost palpable silence. Emily had never seen him so defenseless. It was as if, for the first time, he had realized that he didn't control everything, that he wasn't the center of his own family's narrative. She, on the other hand, felt something she rarely experienced: clarity. Her brother had told her story her whole life, shaping how others saw her. And without realizing it, she herself had accepted this lesser role. But in that instant, while the lawyer filed away the documents and Jackson struggled to find his footing, Emily felt the invisible structure of that relationship crumble. The father, even in silence, had seen everything, and he had left his own version of the story in writing. Emily stood up slowly, as if learning to use her body again. Her heart was beating too fast, her legs were trembling, but there was a new firmness in every movement. "I need some air," he murmured, even though he knew he didn't owe anyone there an apology. She went to the door, crossed the room without looking at Jackson, and left the house without waiting for an answer. The cold wind hit her face, carrying a faint scent of impending rain. She went down the porch and walked to the garden, where her father used to spend his afternoons tending to the plants. The small rose bushes, now dry, still held traces of red in their hardened petals. Emily bent down and ran her fingers over the leaves. That touch was familiar, intimate, almost like a farewell she had never had the chance to give. As a teenager, she used to help her father prune the plants. It was one of the few activities where the two actually talked. But even then, her father always seemed to measure his words, as if he were carrying a weight he couldn't share. Emily used to believe his sadness stemmed from his mother's death. Now, for the first time, she wondered if the weight was more complex. Perhaps guilt. Perhaps regret. Perhaps the awareness that she had allowed her son to create an unfair narrative about her. Her hands trembled, her throat burned. She felt the tears welling up, but she fought back. She had cried alone so many times over the years that now she wanted to be strong, even if just for a minute. That's when she heard footsteps behind her. Jackson. He stopped a few feet away, taking a deep breath, as if he needed to prepare himself to speak. Emily didn't turn around. She didn't want to see the anger, the frustration, or the resentment etched on his face again. She knew all those feelings by heart. But what came was not anger. Why would he do that? Jackson asked, his voice breaking. Emily closed her eyes. There was no simple answer. I don't know, she replied without moving. You must know, he insisted. But this time, there was no aggression. There was confusion, vulnerability, something almost childlike. He always stood by my side, always gave me everything. I always took care of the house while he, Jackson stopped, unable to finish the sentence. Emily took a slow breath before replying. He did what he thought was right. Jackson gave a short, humorless laugh. Right? Right for whom? Right for you? To ruin everything I've taken care of? I stayed here, Emily. I took care of him. You weren't even living at home anymore. She finally turned around and faced him with an expression that was neither anger nor guilt. It was something firm, profound, that she didn't know she was capable of sustaining. Jackson, he said calmly, I no longer lived here because there was no room for me in this house. You made sure of that for years. He opened his mouth to retort, but nothing came out. Emily continued, You always thought I was good for nothing, but I always tried to take care of you, even when you yelled at me, even when you called me useless, even when you kicked me out of the kitchen on the day of Mom's funeral because you said I was ruining the mood. Jackson looked away, his face tense as if he had difficulty hearing each word. Emily continued, her voice low but unwavering. I left this house because being here made me believe your version of events. Dad didn't do anything to defend me. Maybe because you made so much noise that he didn't know how to handle it. She took a deep breath. But he saw more than you think. Jackson ran a hand through his short hair, clearly disturbed. It was strange to see him like this, without arrogance, without the same control he had always exerted over everything. For a moment, he seemed not to know how to exist outside the role he had created for himself. Are you ... really going to keep all the money? He asked, almost whispering. Emily hesitated. She didn't know how to respond. She didn't know how to be cruel. But she also didn't know how to sacrifice something that was ultimately hers. I don't know what I'm gonna do, he admitted. It's a lot to process. But I don't want to fight with you, Jackson. He laughed, a weak, empty laugh. You always say that. Always trying to avoid conflict. Always trying to be the nice girl. Emily held the gaze. I'm not trying to be nice. I'm just tired. The wind blew again, scattering leaves across the lawn. For a moment, the two were silent, until Jackson seemed to give up on the conversation. He turned his back and went back inside the house, dragging his feet as if carrying a weight he didn't know how to let go of. Emily stood there for long minutes, observing the quiet street. Her father had left her an inheritance that would change her life forever, but the real change seemed much more internal. It was as if an invisible door had been opened. She slowly made her way back to the house, where the lawyer was still waiting with a kind and understanding expression. When she entered, he stood up and handed her a white envelope. This is the final transfer document, he said. And here is the letter your father left just for you. Emily felt her heart race. The envelope was light and thin, but it felt like it weighed a ton. She held it carefully, as if it were too fragile to squeeze. Can I read it later? She asked, almost in a whisper. Of course, the lawyer replied. It's something personal. Only read it when you're ready. She nodded. Jackson reappeared in the room, but this time he was quiet, withdrawn, like a smaller shadow within a larger body. He said nothing. He just watched. Unsure how to act, the lawyer gathered his papers and prepared to leave. Emily, he said before leaving, your father trusted you very much, more than you can imagine. She thanked him, her voice choked with emotion, and accompanied him to the door. When she closed it, she felt a silence fill the house. A silence that hadn't been there before. A different kind of silence, not one filled with oppression, but with possibility. Emily returned to the center of the room, looked at the envelope in her hands and took a deep breath. She sat on the sofa and carefully broke the seal. Her father's firm handwriting filled the page. She read slowly, absorbing each word as if they were finally the answers she had waited for her whole life. My daughter, if you're reading this, it means it's time I told you what I never managed to in life. You were always the most sensitive part of this house, and perhaps that's why you carried a heavier burden than you should have. I was afraid to admit my mistakes, afraid to show my regrets, and so I let you carry a pain that was never yours." Emily felt her eyes burning. "Jackson always needed attention. You always needed silence. And I, out of cowardice, gave him everything and accepted everything from you. I should have balanced that. I should have shown you that I saw your strength." She clutched the paper tightly between her trembling fingers. "You took care of me when I was sick. You stayed up all night thinking I wouldn't notice. I did notice. And I never forgot." Emily brought her hand to her face. "This money isn't compensation. I can't make up for what I didn't do, but it's a start. It's something so you finally have the chance to make choices, not obligations. May you have freedom, my daughter. The freedom I never had the courage to seek for myself." She wept silently, her warm tears falling onto the letter. "Forgive me for not being the father you deserved, and for being too much of a father than Jackson needed, even when he didn't deserve it." Emily closed her eyes. The letter continued, "But know this, I saw you. I always saw you, even when you thought you were invisible." She pressed the paper against her chest. It was the first time in her entire life that she had felt her father truly speak to her. And there, on that old sofa, surrounded by memories, sorrows, and possibilities, she realized that she was no longer the girl who had believed for so many years to be weak. She was, finally, someone whom her own father recognized as strong, and that would change everything. Emily remained seated on the sofa for long minutes, holding the letter as if it were a fragment of her father that could still warm her hand. It was strange to feel so much affection coming from words written by someone who, in life, seemed so distant, as if the man she knew and the man who wrote those lines were two different versions of the same person, one silent and broken, and the other sincere and repents. The sound of a glass landing on the table caught her attention. Jackson was standing in the middle of the room, watching her with an expression she couldn't decipher. It wasn't anger, nor was it regret. It was more like someone who had woken from a dream that had lasted years and was now trying to understand where he was. "This changes everything for you, doesn't it?" he said, his voice low. Emily didn't answer. She carefully placed the letter inside the envelope as if it were a living thing. Jackson ran a hand over his face and took a deep breath. I don't know what to do now," he admitted. "I don't know what it means to me." She looked at him for a few seconds and realized that, for the first time in her life, her brother seemed truly lost, not feigning insecurity to manipulate someone, but genuinely disoriented. His usual arrogance had vanished, as if the truth had finally dismantled the character he had played for so long. "You still have the house," Emily said. "That hasn't changed." He laughed briefly, bitterly. "The house," he murmured. "Do you think that matters? Do you think I cared about money?" He paused, hesitated, and then finished in an almost inaudible voice. "I just wanted to be the favorite son. That's all." Emily didn't know what to say. Her revelation had been liberating. His seemed devastating. Jackson paced the room, restless, as if searching for something he had lost. "He never said any of that," he continued. "He never said that." His voice faltered. "That I was a problem. He always let me do what I wanted. He always supported me, or so I thought. Now I don't know. I don't know anything. Was it all a lie?" Emily took a deep breath. "It wasn't a lie," she replied. "He was your father, and he loved you too. He just, didn't know how to balance things. He didn't know how to take care of us the right way." Jackson stopped, stared at his sister for several long seconds, and then looked away, as if it were too difficult to bear. "I don't know how to deal with this," he admitted. "I don't know how to live knowing that he trusted you more." Emily fidgeted with her fingers, unsure how to continue the conversation. But something inside her, something new, stronger, pushed her to try. "It's not about him trusting more," she said. "It's about what he saw in each of us. You always spoke loudly, always took up space, always showed what you wanted. I didn't. I stayed quiet and everyone thought I had nothing to say. Maybe he thought I needed something different. Maybe he saw that you were managing on your own and that I had no one on my side." Jackson closed his eyes, taking a deep breath. as if those words penetrated layers he didn't want to revisit. "Do you see me as a monster?" he asked, without looking at her. Emily remained silent for a few seconds. She didn't want to say anything cruel, but she also didn't want to lie. "No," he finally replied. "I don't think you're a monster. I think you were scared, and I think you took that fear out on me because I was the only person who didn't fight back." He slowly opened his eyes, and for the first since they were children, he seemed to genuinely hear what she was saying. I don't know how to apologize for all this," he murmured. Emily felt a strange mixture of sadness, and she had spent her life trying to be strong in front of him, even if only on the inside. Now, seeing him vulnerable was almost harder than seeing him scream. "You don't need to ask," she said. "Not now. Just ... try to be different from now on." He nodded slowly, as if it were a gigantic task. Night fell without them noticing. The lawyer had left hours ago, and the house seemed larger, colder. Emily stood up, put the envelope in her bag, and grabbed her car key. Jackson walked her to the door, but said nothing. He just stood there, like a boy who didn't know whether to run after his sister or let her go. The road was dark as Emily drove back to her apartment. The streetlights created a hypnotic rhythm on the wet road, reflecting the glare of the headlights. The neighborhood where she lived was simple but welcoming. Small 3-story buildings, windows lit with yellow lights, children running in the courtyard even at night, and neighbors who greeted each other kindly. She parked in the same corner where she always left her car and slowly climbed the stairs. Each step seemed to carry the weight of an entire life rearranging itself within her. When she entered the apartment, everything was exactly the same. The simple sofa, the shelves with books cataloged by color, the small second-hand wooden table, and the soft scent of lavender from the automatic air freshener. But she wasn't the same. Nothing seemed the same. Emily put her bag down on the sofa, took off her coat, and sat on the bed with her father's envelope in her hand. "Spares." She opened the letter again, rereading each line as if she needed to make sure that this moment really existed. That it wasn't a dream, a fantasy created by an exhausted mind. His words remained there, clear, real, imperfect, but sincere. Proof that she was never invisible. For the first time in many years, Emily cried without hiding her face. She cried for her father, for her brother, for herself. She cried for the girl who spent her childhood apologizing for existing. She cried for the young adult she believed was too small to leave a mark on the world. She cried for the enormous emptiness she had always felt and which now unexpectedly was beginning to fill. She cried for everything that had been and for everything that could finally have been. In the following days, life began to move in a new direction. The lawyer scheduled another meeting to explain the details of the investment transfer, taxes, financial management, and next steps. Emily listened with a focus she didn't even know she possessed. The amount was too large for someone who had always lived carefully, paying attention to her savings, but she committed to making sound decisions. Meanwhile, Jackson kept his distance. He sent a few short messages, full of broken sentences. Something like, "We can talk later," or "I'm still processing." Emily didn't know how to respond. Part of her wanted to keep her distance to protect herself. Another part wanted to believe that her brother could change. Even in death, their father still influenced their lives. Gradually, Emily began to make decisions, small but symbolic decisions. She renewed her apartment lease, bought new furniture, and had the walls painted blue, the color she had always liked that never dared to use at home. She took a few days off work to breathe, write, and reconnect with herself. One night, sitting at the table, she opened a folder on her computer and wrote something she had never imagined possible. Life plan. It was a simple document. It had topics such as courses I wanted to take, places I wanted to visit, skills I wanted to develop, people I wanted to forgive, internal barriers that I wanted to break down, financial objectives, decisions she wanted to make for herself, not for others. Each line seemed like a step out of the shadow that had always inhabited it. She also reread the sentence from her father's letter several times. "You were never small." That had become his personal mantra. One late afternoon, 2 months later, Jackson showed up at her apartment. He didn't warn her beforehand. He just knocked on the door, and his expression was serious but not aggressive. Emily cautiously opened the door. "Hi," he said. "Hey." He entered slowly, as if entering unfamiliar territory. He fidgeted with his fingers, looked around, astonished by the blue walls. "You painted." "I painted it." Silence. "It turned out beautiful," he said. She smiled, a small but genuine smile. Jackson took a deep breath, clasped his hands, and finally said what he was carrying. "I am in therapy." Emily opened her eyes, surprised. "Serious?" "Yes," he replied, looking at the floor. "Father's letter really affected me. I thought, I don't know, that everything was fine, that I was strong, that you were the weak one, that I had to take care of everything, and that you had nothing to offer. And now I see that, maybe I've been living a lie." He stopped, swallowed hard. "I wanted to try to be your real brother." Emily felt her chest warm. That phrase was something she had waited for her whole life without believing it would. "Actually come. I would like that," she replied sincerely. Jackson nodded, his eyes shining with something that seemed like contained emotion. "Me too." The two stood there in the middle of the room for the first time in decades, simply being brothers. Time passed, and although many things still needed healing, Emily discovered something precious. Freedom wasn't just in her inheritance. It was in everything she finally allowed herself to feel and be. She took library management courses, learned new skills, and discovered interests she had hidden because she thought they weren't important. She started traveling, taking short trips within her own state, exploring historic cities, trails, and hidden cafes. With each trip, she met new people, new versions of herself. Jackson continued therapy and gradually began to change. He didn't transform immediately, no one changes that quickly, but Emily saw signs. He showed up less to complain and more to ask how she was doing. He talked less about what he wanted and more about how he felt. For the first time, they were building a relationship they had never had before. Her father's letter remained in the drawer beside her bed. Emily reread it whenever she needed a reminder that she wasn't invisible. It was a reminder that even profound mistakes can bring about transformation, even after death. One morning, a few months later, she received a letter from the lawyer, a simple envelope with her name carefully written on it. Upon opening it, she found only a sentence from her father, written on a piece of paper that the lawyer had kept in his file. "I watched you bloom in silence. Emily, now bloom aloud." She smiled, and in that moment, for the first time, she felt that she was truly living a life that was her own. Not because someone allowed it, not because someone decided to, but because she finally believed. By force, in freedom, in terms of visibility, and above all, in itself.